just like whether it's listening to political commentators or seeing like discussion in comment sections, like seeing the energy from the Yellow Vest protests over there, just kind of like infecting, and contributing to that energy spreading to other people. I love seeing that that tension rise.
Totally.
We could do something.
Totally.
I love it.
Yeah,
I think that's why they try to shut it down in the media.
Yeah.
Because they don't want it to spread like that.
Yeah, which is really sad. I get that it's kind of like, it's just the tyrant parent who's just like worried about their kids getting a little bit too rambunctious and it's going to break everything. And it's like...
that is also kind of you're attributing a lot of nefariousness to the media, where it could just be that they think that showing the cars on fire is just going to make them more money,
That's fair. There's the income factor or the ratings. Yeah. I think also a lot of Western media is kind of like part of the ruling class now. Not necessarily in the fact that they have a lot of power, but like that's the world they live in.
Yeah.
Like they're elbow to elbow with the powerful and they think things are great and the system's awesome and they didn't get hired to rock the boat and all that jazz.
Yeah. I think there's definitely a certain amount of that, but I also just think that the push for ratings would push them towards
sensationalism.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
But it's just like, I agree with you on that. It's just now we're going to be talking about whether or not it's conscious or unconscious. Because either way, they're playing to the game of the politicians.
Well, I definitely think it's conscious that they're going for the sensationalist stuff. I don't necessarily think that it's conscious that they're undermining the revolution.
Exactly.
I think.
No, I agree.
Going too far.
But I agree with that. But I'm just saying that would be. They're still doing that. So it's just whether or not we're going to like place blame on them, which I never really like looked to place blame, but it's just more being aware of what their effect on the situation is. Because obviously they're not trying to observe the situation objectively, which almost always that's what or at least let's say in the past the media has kind of done that.
That's what they're supposed to do.
Exactly. It's difficult because I see media's fundamental role as a check on power, as much as it is about educating people. And so to me, it should always be on the side of the people and critiquing the powerful. And call out excesses if there are excesses in the actions of the people. But, I feel like the vast majority of the time it's the opposite way, buttressing the arguments of the powerful and, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, it would be interesting to see how much of it is actually trying to do that, trying to sway it in the politician's point of view. Yeah. You do see it. You see where it could come from just because of the monetary.
And I really don't think most of that is an intentional thing. I think that's just kind of like the way it goes unconsciously because of the nature of those companies.
Well, and it's almost it's almost a really shitty situation because the people who are supposed to be that really aware, conscious of the I guess what's occurring, that the not the data necessarily, but maybe the meta issues that are occurring, that seemed to be that was the investigative journalist kind of idea.
Journalism used to be about the muckrakers, fucking digging out, stories about the powerful. But now you have, any journalist on cable is going to be making, big bucks, and they like things the way they are, and they've bought the narrative of America being, the golden city on the hill, and
again, I think
all of our foreign wars are benevolent and all of that.
There's almost always this. It's reaching that equilibrium point, I think, for how our media works now. It's the equilibrium point of where there was this check on the system that was in place that obviously needed to be checked. But what happened was eventually the system incorporated that part of the system, that part of the check, I guess. And so now there needs to be another check. Because there always will be. It's we can't ever become complacent in that whole, it's kind of utopianism, thinking that we don't need to have a check on our systems.
Right.
That's
Yeah, well, the system of checks and balances works well until you add another power structure outside of it that
Yeah.
can influence all of the systems. Right?
Exactly.
And that's
true.
what
too.
we
Yeah.
have now with our economic system, where money rules everything.
Right.
So that is sort of the ruling power, and there's not really a good check on that.
Yeah, and like that's, I mean, in my head, the first thing that comes to mind there is just that we need to understand that everything is not even materialistic in the sense that there is a monetary value. Like the only way to be compensated is through a material means. There's also the means of any kind of reputation or any kind of social responsibility. It's kind of like the idea, like one of the things I always hear Jordan Peterson say is that like there's a hierarchy because the burrito distribution, the people who do the most work should get the most money. And like that logic is totally, I think it's pretty sound.
Yeah.
The problem is that also there's an underlying premise that the only way for those people who are creating the most to get compensated is through money, which is
Right.
not true. There's an emotional and social benefit to being a leader that creates lots of things.
Yeah.
And if we don't ever recognize that, if we don't ever recognize that, then it will disappear. At least to them, it'll definitely disappear.
Well, I think that we definitely do have some elements of prestige in our culture. It's
Mhm.
just that we don't necessarily put them in places that make a lot of sense.
Yeah,
Yeah.
celebrity and
Exactly.
bullshit like that.
And I think it's great to try and reevaluate where those are, but I
Yeah.
also think it's really hard to do. And I
We're
think
very
before-
bad at distributing honor in this society.
Exactly. Finding a way to do that well would be awesome, but
Mm-hmm.
I think we also need to find a way to check the thing that will always be an incentive, which is the material world.
Totally. I just think that it's incorrect if you just look at the system and say that the only way to compensate is materialistic, which seems to be the only way to defend the wealth inequality right now.
Yeah.
It seems as though the only way to defend it is to say that the people who work the hardest should get the most money.
And it's not like you shouldn't
Because that's the only way you
compensate
can
those
compensate.
people more. It's just how much more. Like,
Yeah.
you don't have to go overboard, you know?
Totally.
Like the Mondragon thing, like 8 times the lowest paid is what the highest paid gets.
Yeah,
Something like that makes perfect goddamn sense.
Yeah.
totally.
And it's also, you know, recognizing like something that's very fundamental to any human community or society, you know, small or large, which is that you have to recognize that even if you have certain people who contribute more than others, it's a team effort, you know?
Yeah,
And something else that I think would be valuable is to reevaluate our tax structure and try to target those systems of rent seeking and
Right.
tax them
Right.
enough that they're not a huge issue anymore.
Yeah.
Because the fact that that is such a huge source of income is a huge problem because it's
Yeah.
not creating wealth,
Yeah.
and that's the biggest problem.
Yeah, the whole housing market's actually really weird.
It's
when you
really
think about
really weird.
it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's gross too.
Yeah. I definitely think there should be like bare bones, basic public housing available for the poorest in society.
Yeah.
I think that makes a lot of sense.
yeah, dude.
I mean, we have more empty homes than we have homeless people.
It blows-
I mean, in what world is that?
They have that for seniors, but not for.
Well,
And they have some like for small families that are
Yeah,
Again,
in
it-
poverty line.
it's very, especially in this country, it's not very inclusive.
It's the same thing with the freaking healthcare. It's the same kind of like people need a base necessity for things that obviously take away from our economy. People who get sick all the time are going to take away from our economy, regardless of if they have insurance or not.
Yeah.
And if we have people living on the streets during cold weather or any time of the year, they will obviously get sick more.
Yeah.
It's
Shocking.
I know.
And
It's
if we
not.
have people that are not able to get mental health help when they need it,
Exactly.
then they're obviously going to cause problems.
And get more sick.
Yeah.
It's like, again, it's one of those things that's almost annoying because you just
It's-
look at it and
It's
you're
super
like,
annoying. It's annoying because there's a good logical argument for it without even going into the humanitarian argument.
yeah,
And the humanitarian
Right.
argument is pretty compelling.
Those are always my
Exactly.
favorite.
Yeah.
Exactly.
When rhetoric and logic line up, it's
Yeah.
just like, oh.
And then we're still like, nah.
Yeah, right? Like, okay, now you're just a motherfucker. Like,
Right? Yeah.